The glass shattered before anyone realized she dropped it. Champagne sprayed across the white linen, and the sound a sharp, crystalline crack cut through the music like a warning. For one frozen moment, the entire ballroom turned toward her. Marylin Carter, CEO of Carter & Doyle Financial, stood under the chandeliers of the Langford Hotel, her hand trembling around an empty stem. The LED screen behind her flickered, then bloomed into life showing her own face, twisted in anger, pushing a homeless man to the ground. The crowd gasped. The orchestra stopped mid-note. The scent of roses and caviar thickened into silence. "That's her," someone whispered. "God, that's really her." Marilyn's pulse pounded so hard she could hear it. The video looped again. Each replay felt slower, uglier. Her voice echoed from the speakers, brittle and cruel. "Get away from me." The words slapped her harder than they had slapped the man in the video. She wanted to move, to breathe, to vanish, but every camera in the room had already locked onto her. Fred Doyle, the board chairman, appeared beside her, calm and venomous. "You've got 10 minutes, Marylin," he hissed. "Fix this or pack up." 10 minutes. Her mind began to calculate the cost of every second. Beside her stood Jonah Reese, the stranger she had paid to stand as her fiancé. In his rented suit and polished shoes, he looked passable enough for a photograph, but his stillness unnerved her. He watched the chaos around them with the quiet of someone who had seen worse. When their eyes met, he didn't look angry or afraid. He looked sorry. The MC tried to speak. "Ladies and gentlemen, we seem to be experiencing a technical glitch." "It's not a glitch," a journalist shouted. "That's the CEO herself." Murmurs became voices, voices became noise. Marylin felt the ground shift beneath her heels. The PR team at the back gestured frantically, phones pressed to ears. She forced a smile, one she'd perfected in 20 years of damage control. "Please," she began. "That clip is completely out of context." A woman in the front row, a longtime investor, rose to her feet. "Then explain it." Fred's whisper burned her ear. 8 minutes now. Marilyn's gaze darted toward Jonah. "Say something," she mouthed. "What do you want me to say?" he asked quietly. "That you were with me, that this isn't what it looks like." "It looks like what it is," he said. His tone was too calm, too steady. She turned from him, jaw tight. She could not afford cracks, not tonight. Not in front of them. The ballroom lights were merciless. Her reflection shimmered in every wineglass and chrome tray, 100 versions of herself, all caught mid-lie. She stepped away from the podium and into the side corridor. Jonah followed, his footsteps soft against the marble. Behind them, the host's voice trembled through the speakers, begging the guests to stay seated. In the hallway, the harsh fluorescent light exposed every flaw makeup had hidden. Fred came after her, phone still pressed to his ear. "The video's viral already. 25,000 retweets. The board's watching live. You're done unless you pull a miracle." "I don't do miracles," she snapped. "Apparently, you don't do humility either." He walked off. Marylin pressed a hand to her forehead. The night had turned to glass again, fragile, seconds from another shatter. She caught Jonah's reflection in the mirror. He wasn't gloating. He looked almost concerned. "Don't," she warned. "Don't pity me. Then stop looking like someone who needs it. You don't know me. I know that video wasn't the first time you pushed someone down." Her breath caught. "You're out of line." "No," he said softly. "I'm just not on your payroll long enough to care." Emily Tran burst through the door, tablet in hand. "Marylin, the press is demanding a statement. They're saying the man in the video is the same guy who's standing next to you. You have to say something now." Marylyn's voice steadied. "We'll say it's fake. Deepfake AI, everyone's using that word now. We'll spin it. People don't care if it's fake," Emily said. "They care that it feels real." "Get them off my back," Marylin ordered. "I'll handle the room." Jonah exhaled, a quiet sound between disbelief and sadness. "You still think you can handle it?" She turned to him, the CEO mask snapping back into place. "You're here to make me look human. So look at me like I matter." He gave a small, weary smile. "Maybe you should try it first." She ignored him and walked toward the ballroom doors. The hum of voices grew louder, sharper. As she gripped the handle, she could see flashes bursting behind the frosted glass. "Reporters, investors, vultures. You don't have to go back in there," Jonah said quietly. "I've been fighting rooms like this my whole life," she replied. "I know how to survive." "Maybe surviving isn't the point." She looked at him, confusion flickering through her fear. "Then what is?" Remembering why you started climbing in the first place. The words lingered, unwanted but heavy. She straightened her shoulders, forced a calm breath, and stepped back into the storm. The cameras blinded her instantly. Questions flew like arrows. Miss Carter, was that man your fiancé? Do you plan to resign? Was the attack racially motivated? She reached the podium again, feeling her heart hammer under the sequins of her gown. Jonah stood beside her, silent and still. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, her voice steady, practiced, cold. The clip you saw tonight, yes, it happened. But it does not define me. One mistake does not erase a lifetime of work. Tell that to him. A voice called. For the first time, Marylin faltered. She looked at Jonah, and his eyes, gentle, honest, didn't move away. The crowd's silence deepened, waiting. Tonight, she said finally, you will see the real me. The flashes erupted again, white and merciless. Somewhere deep inside, she felt the fragile shell of her confidence cracking, and beneath it, a truth she wasn't ready to face, the kind that doesn't destroy a career, only reveals the person buried beneath it. 3 weeks earlier, the sky over Manhattan had that winter tint that made even success look cold. Marylin Carter stood by the window of her corner office, the city glowing below like a constellation she owned. Behind her, voices murmured, board members, assistants, the endless hum of people who waited for her to decide what mattered. On the conference table lay the newest press release about the company's charity gala. Empathy in action, the headline read. She almost laughed. The words felt foreign in her mouth, like reciting a prayer she didn't believe in. Fred Doyle, her partner in profit and occasional adversary, leaned back in his chair. You'll need a personal angle this year, he said. People are tired of numbers. They want a story. Marylin turned from the window. They'll get results. Stories don't pay dividends. Neither does arrogance, he replied, but she was already walking out. The elevator doors closed behind her with a hiss, sealing in the echo of a conversation she refused to hear. Outside, the December air bit at her face. New York was a mirror, shiny on top, cracked underneath. She moved quickly. Phone pressed to her ear, barking orders about quarterly returns. At the corner of 47th and Lexington, someone stumbled into her path, a man in a filthy jacket, coffee splashing across her coat. Watch where you're going, she snapped. The man raised both hands, apologetic, eyes hollow but kind. Sorry, ma'am, didn't see you. Her temper flared, raw and reflexive. You people think the world owes you something. When he tried to speak again, she shoved past him. The cup clattered, the man fell, and his voice disappeared beneath the noise of traffic. She never looked back. A phone nearby had been recording. Later that night, she poured herself wine and stared at the skyline. Her assistant had emailed a reminder. Gala speech due Friday. She typed a few lines about compassion, deleted them, tried again, and finally wrote, "Success demands sacrifice." It sounded right. It always had. She pressed save. The following morning brought trouble disguised as a compliment. In the boardroom, an investor named Richard Lowell offered her 2 tickets to the Super Bowl. Front row, he said. Consider it appreciation for keeping our portfolio bulletproof. His smile had the practiced warmth of a man who bought everything he couldn't earn. You love football, don't you? I love results, she said, sliding the envelope back across the table. And I don't accept bribes wrapped in courtesy. The room chuckled awkwardly. Richard's eyes hardened. Careful, Marylin. Empires fall faster than they're built. Then build yours better, she replied, and left. Outside the boardroom, Emily Tran caught up with her, tablet in hand. You could have handled that softer. Soft doesn't win, Marylin said. Neither does burning bridges. Emily murmured. But Marylin had already entered her office. She didn't see Emily's worried glance linger on the phone, lighting up with messages, early signs of the video beginning to circulate. By the time it reached Marylin's desk 2 days later, it had nearly 50,000 views. The clip was grainy, but unmistakable. Her PR team flooded the feed with statements. Context missing. Fake account. Doctored footage. None of it mattered. The comments were knives. Arrogant CEO. Privilege at its finest. She talks about charity but kicks the poor. She called the communications director, her voice slicing through the air. Fix it. We're trying, the woman said. But we need a distraction, a story that changes the narrative. Then make one, Marylin said. Invent one if you have to. We could humanize you, the woman suggested hesitantly. A fiancé, maybe? Someone stable, personal, something to soften the edges before the gala. Marylin laughed without humor. A fiancé? I don't even have time for lunch. Find someone. Fast. A photo, a dinner. Something the press can print. It'll work. That night, she walked through Grand Central, head down, coat collar raised. She wasn't looking for redemption, only control. The station was a blur of motion, but near the far exit she saw him, a man sitting against a pillar. Cardboard sign on his lap. Former veteran. Looking for work, not pity. There was a steadiness in the way he sat. A dignity that didn't fit the dirt on his hands. She stopped. What's your name? Jonah. He said, surprised. Jonah Reese. Do you drink? Not lately. Can you follow instructions? Depends on who's giving them. Me. She said. And I pay well. She told him the plan. One night. Stand beside her at the gala. Smile when cameras turned. Say nothing. $3,000, cash. He listened quietly, then asked. And if I walk away with your money? Then you'll never get another chance like this. Deal? He said. His voice had a warmth that unsettled her, like a man used to truth even when trading lies. The next afternoon, Jonah showed up at the boutique she'd chosen. The tailor looked skeptical until Marylin nodded. A shower, a shave, a clean suit later, the man in the mirror barely resembled the one from the street. But his eyes hadn't changed. You look respectable, she said. You look nervous, he replied. She ignored it. Remember, you're my fiancé. You met me at a fundraiser, we've been together for 6 months, and you work in environmental consulting. He raised an eyebrow. That sounds made up. It is, she said. Just like this. As they left, a news alert pinged her phone. Another outlet had picked up the video. The headline read, CEO of Carter and Doyle, accused of assaulting homeless man. She turned the screen away. We'll fix it after the gala. Jonah followed her toward the waiting car. You sure this is how you want to fix it? Do you know another way? Yeah, he said. Tell the truth. The truth doesn't trend, she answered, sliding into the car. The driver pulled into the slow churn of evening traffic. Outside, Christmas lights blinked along the avenue, their warmth mocking the chill between them. Why me? Jonah asked after a while. Out of all the people you could hire. Because you look safe enough to fool them, she said. And desperate enough not to question it. Maybe you picked wrong, he murmured. I stopped being desperate the day I had nothing left to lose. She turned away, unwilling to hear what sounded too close to honesty. When they reached her apartment building, she handed him an envelope. Half now. Half after the event. Don't be late. He nodded, slipping it into his coat. You always buy your way out of trouble like this? Only when it works. Does it? She didn't answer. The elevator doors closed, leaving her alone with her reflection. Upstairs, she poured another glass of wine, and watched the city pulse beneath her. Somewhere below, the man she'd hired walked back into the cold. She told herself it didn't matter. He was a transaction, nothing more. The gala was 3 weeks away. The company would survive. She would survive. But as the night deepened, she couldn't shake the sound of his voice, low, even, unafraid. Tell the truth. She stared at her own reflection in the glass, the city lights flickering across her face. The truth doesn't trend. She whispered again, but this time, it didn't sound convincing. And outside, down on 47th Street, Jonah Reese found a bench under a dead streetlight and smiled faintly to himself. You'll learn, he said to the dark. We all do. Sooner or later. By the morning of the gala, New York gleamed like it had been polished for the occasion. The city's noise felt sharper, as if it too expected Marylin Carter to deliver perfection. She woke before dawn, her head thick with sleeplessness, the newsfeed still lit by her name. CEO or tyrant? One headline asked. Another showed a still from the viral video, the frame frozen at the moment her hand shoved the homeless man away. The comments below were cruel, creative, and endless. She closed the screen, finished her coffee in silence, and looked out over the skyline. In the reflection of the window, her own face looked older than it had yesterday. At the office, chaos had turned clinical. The PR team huddled around a screen, drafting talking points, planning distractions. Emily Tran stood by the doorway, holding a folder. We're trending in 15 countries, she said quietly. Half of it's bad. The other half's worse. What about our investors? Nervous. Some are pulling out of the charity auction tonight. They say it's too risky to be photographed with you. Cowards, Marylin said, but the word didn't feel right in her mouth. Fred Doyle entered then, his expression unreadable. You're still going through with it? We have no choice, she replied. Canceling looks like guilt. So does pretending, he said. Pick your poison. I'll take the one I can control. You've been trying to control storms your whole life, he muttered, walking away. Jonah arrived that afternoon, punctual, wearing the same navy suit she'd chosen. His hair was slicked back, his shoes shone like mirrors. You clean up well, she said. I learned from the best, he replied. He handed her a small box. Inside was a simple silver tie clip. I thought your PR people might like a gift exchange photo. Makes it look real. That's thoughtful, she admitted, surprised. Don't sound so shocked. Some of us remember how to be decent. They rehearsed the script once more in the boardroom. We've been together for 6 months, she said, pacing. We met at a fundraiser, fell in love over shared values, and tonight we're here to give back. You sound like a press release. That's the point. And if someone asks what I do? You're an environmental consultant. Then I'll tell them I clean up other people's messes, he said softly. She shot him a look, but he only smiled. The black Lincoln pulled up to the Langford just before sunset. Flashbulbs exploded the moment they stepped out. Jonah offered his arm. She took it. Her grip too tight. The carpet felt endless beneath her heels. Inside, chandeliers glowed, music swelled, and people pretended to adore her. It was the theater of wealth. And she was its star actress. You're doing fine, she whispered through her teeth. You look terrified, he replied. Emily greeted them near the registration desk, her tone careful. Everything's set. Just be yourself. Marylin smirked. That's the problem, isn't it? In the ballroom, the catering staff moved with silent precision. A young waiter stumbled near the buffet, and a tray clattered. Marylin flinched instinctively, memories flickering like lightning. Jonah noticed. Still haunts you? What? That push. She ignored him, but the question clung to her skin. As the evening wore on, the air thickened with tension disguised as luxury. Conversations stopped when she passed. Smiles stayed just long enough to hide judgment. Marylin's pulse never slowed. Then, amid the swirl of sequins and tuxedos, she noticed something strange: a German shepherd sitting near the back doors, wearing a small service vest marked Ranger. The hotel's security dog. When Jonah passed, Ranger's ears perked up, tail wagging. The handler frowned. That's odd. He doesn't usually react like that. Jonah crouched, scratching behind the dog's ears with familiarity. Hey boy. Haven't seen you since the shelter, huh? The handler blinked. Shelter? Jonah smiled faintly. He was part of a police donation program last year. I helped train him for a few weeks. The handler nodded slowly, but Marylin's stomach tightened. The dog pressed closer, nose twitching at Jonah's shoes, as if recognizing something hidden. We should go, she said sharply. In the kitchen, the smell of roasted shrimp and butter hung heavy. Jonah lingered by a counter where leftover rolls were being bagged. What happens to these? He asked a chef. We toss most. Regulations. Mind if I take a few? There's a shelter 3 blocks away. Go ahead. Jonah began stacking rolls in a small box, his movements quiet, practiced. Marylin's patience cracked. You're not here to play charity. You're here to play fiancé. He turned, calm. Funny. Those sound like the same job tonight. You think this is funny? No, he said. Tragic, maybe. She grabbed his arm. You don't get to moralize. You're here because I pay you. He met her gaze without flinching. You're right. You pay me to pretend you care. But maybe that's a harder role than you thought. The silence between them throbbed. Somewhere behind them, the chef cleared his throat and turned away. They returned to the ballroom just as Fred climbed the stage, tapping the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced. Tonight we celebrate the vision and leadership of our CEO, Miss Marylin Carter. Applause filled the room. Marylin forced a smile. Jonah stepped beside her, his posture perfect. Flashbulbs ignited again. For a moment, it almost worked. Then, across the room, a PR associate whispered urgently into Fred's ear. His face shifted. He handed her the microphone. Marylin, they're ready for your speech. She began, words rehearsed to perfection. We at Carter and Doyle believe in compassion, in giving back to those who've given us so much trust. Her voice faltered. Jonah was watching her, not with disdain but with something worse, quiet truth. And tonight, she continued, forcing steadiness, we reaffirm our promise to serve. The applause was polite but thin. Fred leaned close as the guests dispersed for dinner. You survived the speech. Barely. That's all I needed. You'll need more than survival. The board meets tomorrow. They want blood. They'll get results. They want repentance, he said. Later, in the hallway, Marylin found Jonah by the window, looking down at the city lights. Why stay? She asked. You could take the money and vanish. And miss the ending? He said. I like seeing how stories finish. You think this is a story? Every downfall is. She looked away, anger prickling at the back of her neck. You have no idea what it takes to build something from nothing. Sure I do, he said. I built a life once. Lost it when people like you called it collateral damage. His tone was calm, but the words cut deep. You worked for this company? A long time ago, he said, not meeting her eyes. Different division. Different ideals. Before she could ask, Emily appeared, pale and nervous. Fred wants to see you. Something's happening online again. What now? Another video. Longer this time. Marylin's heart clenched. Show me. Emily turned the tablet toward her. It wasn't just the shove anymore, it was the aftermath. The man on the ground looking up at her, saying quietly, I forgive you. The comment section burned. She didn't even look back. Jonah's reflection in the screen was still, unreadable. It's too late, he said softly. No, Marylin whispered. Not yet. She closed the tablet and started toward the ballroom again, her heels striking the marble in steady, furious rhythm. Behind her, Jonah watched, knowing the storm hadn't even begun. The night cracked open like glass. Inside the ballroom of the Langford, the air was heavy with perfume, power, and nerves. Marylin Carter stood at the edge of the stage, her pulse counting seconds faster than the orchestra's rhythm. She knew something had gone wrong the moment the whispers began, a subtle tremor moving through the tables like wind through wheat. Emily Tran's face was pale near the exit, holding her tablet like it might explode. Fred Doyle was in conversation with two investors, his jaw tight, his eyes darting toward the main screen. Jonah stood a few feet behind Marylin, his hands clasped loosely. The calm in his posture almost cruel. Then the lights dimmed. A spotlight flickered on the stage. The giant LED screen came alive again. At first, it was the charity logo, then the sound changed. Sharp, familiar. Like the crack of glass from weeks ago. The video played. The same footage of Marylin shoving the homeless man. But this time it didn't end. The crowd watched in silent horror as the man in the clip, lying on the cold pavement, looked up and whispered, I forgive you. Marylin's throat went dry. She had never seen that part. She hadn't stayed long enough that day to hear it. The orchestra fell silent, the room shrinking into a vacuum of attention. The video ended, and for a breathless moment, no one moved. Then came the shouting. How dare you preach compassion after that? Is this your version of charity? Cameras rose like weapons, phones recording, faces eager for blood. Fred's voice cut through the chaos, low and final. You're finished. Marylin turned, desperate, to Jonah, but his expression was unreadable. The dog, Ranger, barked from the corner, startled by the noise, breaking the heavy silence. Get her off the stage, someone ordered. Marylin felt hands guiding her, half force, half pity, toward the side corridor. The flashes followed like gunfire. She stumbled into the hallway, her chest tight. Jonah followed, closing the door behind them. For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of her breathing. Who sent that video? She demanded. You really don't know? It's sabotage some competitor. Or karma, Jonah said quietly. Don't you dare lecture me now, she snapped. You don't know what I've sacrificed. He looked at her, calm but sharp. You sacrificed people. That's business. No, he said, stepping closer. That's cruelty with a budget. She stared at him, words dying in her throat. You think you're better than me? You begged for money on the street. I didn't beg, he said softly. I built. I lost. I started again. But I never forgot what a person looks like when they're invisible. His eyes flicked to the closed door. You made them invisible. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Marylin turned away, gripping the edge of a table until her knuckles whitened. Why are you even here? You could have walked away with the money. Because I wanted to see if there was anything left worth saving. She let out a short, bitter laugh. And? Still deciding, he said. Fred burst in then, his face flushed with fury. The investors are gone. The sponsors are pulling out. You just sank the company. We can fix it, she said automatically. No, Marylin. You can't talk your way out of this one. I built this empire. And you destroyed it by thinking you were the only one who mattered. His voice softened for the first time that night. You forgot the difference between leading and ruling. He turned to leave. Pack your things tomorrow. You're done. The door slammed. The echo lingered like a verdict. Jonah's voice broke the silence. Now what? Now? She said, forcing a laugh that sounded more like a choke. Now I disappear. You could face it. Face what? A mob with cameras? A board with pitchforks? Face yourself. She shot him a look of disgust. You're enjoying this, aren't you? You think too highly of your pain, he said gently. It's not about you. He started toward the back exit, where a dim light spilled from the kitchen. Where are you going? To help. Help who? The people you keep pretending to care about. He vanished through the swinging doors. For a moment, she stood alone, trembling with rage and something that felt dangerously like shame. She followed him. In the kitchen, the staff were packing leftover food into bins. Jonah was kneeling beside Ranger, helping an old cook tie a stack of containers. We send these to the shelter every week, the cook said. But tonight's batch might go cold. Too much chaos upstairs. Not if we move fast, Jonah said. Marylin watched him work, sleeves rolled, hands steady. The image was surreal, a man she'd hired to be a prop now acting like the only human being left in the building. You don't have to do that, she said. Someone should, he answered. She picked up one of the boxes, her diamond bracelet catching the light. The weight of it surprised her. These are heavy. So is guilt, Jonah said. For the first time, she didn't snap back. They carried the food out the service door into the alley behind the hotel. The air was cold, the kind that burned the lungs. A small group of homeless men and women huddled near the dumpsters, drawn by the scent. Jonah handed out boxes, his movements patient. When one of the women recognized him, she smiled. You're back, she said. Told you you'd make it off the street. He chuckled softly. Still working on it. Marylin hesitated, box in hand. One of the men looked up at her, his eyes kind despite everything. Thank you, ma'am. She almost said, don't thank me. But the words caught. She knelt, offering him the box. You're welcome, she whispered instead. A gust of wind swept through the alley, scattering napkins, making the scene shimmer under the flickering streetlight. For the first time in weeks, Marylin didn't feel like she was performing. She looked at Jonah, who gave her a small nod of approval. Now that, he said, looks real. Don't get used to it, she muttered. But there was no venom in her tone. A shout broke the moment. Emily appeared at the door, out of breath. The press found out you're back here. They're coming. Marylin's heart jumped. How? Someone leaked it. They think you're doing damage control. They're framing it as a publicity stunt. Of course they are, Marylin said bitterly. Everything's a performance to them. Maybe. Jonah said, but you decide whether it's true. She looked at him, the alley light softening his face. And what if I can't change what they believe? Then stop trying to convince them. Start convincing yourself. The reporters' voices grew louder at the end of the alley. Flashlights bobbed closer. Jonah touched her arm. Go inside. I'll handle this. You'll just make it worse. Trust me. The phrase landed heavy between them. She stepped back, watching as he faced the crowd. A reporter shouted, Are you the homeless man in the video? Jonah smiled faintly. No, he said. But I know what it's like to be invisible. The lights flickered off his face. And maybe she's learning what that means. The questions kept coming. But Marylin barely heard them. Something inside her had shifted. A crack running clean through the armor she'd spent her life polishing. She turned back toward the hotel, the laughter and music of the gala long gone. The halls were empty now, only the echo of her heels and the weight of what came next. Upstairs, in the reflection of the ballroom mirrors, her image split into 100 fragments, each one looking back with different eyes. She didn't recognize any of them. In the silence that followed, she whispered the words Jonah had thrown at her earlier, tasting them like medicine she'd once refused. It's not about me. For the first time, they sounded true. Outside, the flashbulbs faded, and the city swallowed the noise. The night was still, but the wind carried something different now, not applause, not accusation, but the quiet beginning of consequence. Morning crept into the city with a pale, unforgiving light. The Langford Hotel looked hollow after the chaos, balloons sagging, champagne stains dried into the carpet, abandoned napkins like the remains of a battle no one won. In the penthouse suite that had once hosted the company's elite, Marylin Carter sat alone at a table covered in papers, her phone blinking with unanswered calls. The news anchors spoke her name like a sentence. Carter and Doyle in crisis. CEO under fire after viral incident escalates. Every channel, every headline, every whisper belonged to her downfall. She turned off the screen. The silence afterward was worse. She hadn't slept. The mirror across from her caught her reflection, hair undone, lipstick faded, eyes stripped of their usual armor. She looked, for the first time, like someone human. The knock at the door was soft but certain. Jonah stepped inside, still wearing the same suit from the night before, now creased and damp from the cold. He carried 2 coffees. "You look like you could use this," he said. "I don't drink coffee," she murmured. "Then pretend," he replied, setting it down. The faint smell filled the room, bitter, real, grounding. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, she asked, "Are they still outside?" "A few reporters. Some cameras. They'll get bored eventually." "No," she said. "They won't." He looked at her closely. "You could face them. Tell the truth. Not the version your PR team writes. The truth won't save me." "Maybe not," he said. "But it might save what's left of you." She exhaled, closing her eyes. "I don't know who that is anymore." "Then maybe it's time to find out." His voice was steady, not unkind. He took a seat across from her, fingers wrapped around his coffee cup. "Do you remember what you told me the night we met?" She looked up. "I told you to follow instructions. You said you only believe in results. That everything else is noise. So let me ask you, how's that working out?" She wanted to laugh, but the sound died in her throat. "You think this is funny?" "No," he said. "I think it's necessary." His calmness infuriated her and disarmed her at once. "Why do you care? You could have taken the money and disappeared." "Because disappearing doesn't fix anything. And maybe..." He hesitated, eyes distant. "Maybe I needed to see if someone like you could still change." She looked at him then, really looked. The faint scar near his temple, the way his shoulders carried exhaustion without complaint. "You said last night you used to work here. At Carter and Doyle." "I did," he said. "Operations. Until the layoffs. I didn't know. You didn't need to. Numbers don't have names when they're on paper." His words landed heavy between them. "I remember the memo," she whispered. "Cutbacks for efficiency." "Efficiency?" he repeated, a bitter smile tugging at his mouth. "You called it efficiency. I called it losing my life." She winced. "I didn't know it was you." "That's the point, Marylin. You never looked long enough to know anyone." His voice softened again. "Until last night." She turned away, ashamed of how true it felt. Her phone buzzed again, another call from Fred. She ignored it. Jonah rose and walked to the window. The city sprawled below, indifferent, magnificent. "So what now?" she asked quietly. "You'll tell me to hold a press conference, cry on camera, beg forgiveness?" "No," he said. "I'll tell you to do something that scares you." "Which is?" "Go back to where it started." "You mean the street?" "Yes. The man you pushed, his name's Robert Langx. He volunteers at the shelter near 9th Avenue. You know him? He helped me when I had nothing. I told him about you. He forgave you before you even asked." Marylin's breath caught. "Why would he?" "Because he remembers when people still deserved forgiveness." "And you think walking into that place fixes this?" "No. But it might fix you." Hours later, she found herself standing outside the brick building with a hand-painted sign. Haven House. Meals. Shelter. Hope. The irony wasn't lost on her. Jonah held the door open, and the smell of soup and detergent met her. Inside, volunteers moved briskly. Serving plates, folding linens. Conversation filled the air, low, warm, real. It was everything her office had never been. A man in a faded denim jacket looked up from a table. His eyes were kind, steady. The same ones from the video. "Miss Carter," he said. "You came." Her throat tightened. "You're Robert." "That's right." He smiled faintly. "And you're the woman who taught me that people are better than their worst moment. Even if you didn't mean to." She swallowed hard. "I'm sorry," she said. "Not the public kind of sorry, the real one." "I know," he said. "You don't owe me words. You owe yourself a chance to be different." She blinked, tears threatening. Jonah watched quietly, hands in his pockets. "Can I help?" she asked. "You can start by serving." Robert nodded toward the line of trays. "We're short on hands." She hesitated only a second before rolling up her sleeves. The first ladle of soup trembled in her grasp. But the next came easier. An older woman thanked her softly. A child smiled up at her, holding a chipped bowl. Each gesture scraped something loose inside her chest, a layer of cold she hadn't realized was there. Jonah joined beside her, moving with quiet rhythm. "You're not bad at this," he said. "Don't get used to it," she replied, but the edge was gone from her tone. "Too late," he said, smiling. The hours blurred. When the last tray was served and the room grew quiet, Marylin leaned against the counter, breathless but lighter somehow. Robert approached, wiping his hands on a towel. "You did good," he said. "It's not much," she said. "It's everything," he answered. "Most people never even show up." She looked at him, unsure how to respond. He continued. "I heard what happened last night. You'll survive it. Maybe not as a CEO. But maybe as a person." The words hit her harder than any headline. "I don't know if I deserve that. Deserving's not the point. Doing is." He patted her shoulder and walked off. Jonah stepped closer. "You see? He forgave you long before you forgave yourself." "I'm not there yet," she said quietly. "You're getting close." "And what about you?" she asked. "You said you lost everything because of me." "I did," he said, eyes distant. "But I also found something tonight. People can change. Even the ones we least expect." Outside, the wind had softened. The streetlights flickered gold against the wet pavement. Marylin pulled her coat tighter. "What now?" she asked. "Now," Jonah said. "You tell the truth. Not on camera, not for show, just for once." She nodded slowly. "Maybe tomorrow. Maybe tonight," he said. "Because the truth doesn't wait for perfect timing." She looked at him, at the faint smile that carried both sorrow and hope. "You're not what I expected." "Neither are you," he said. They stood in silence, the city breathing around them. Somewhere behind the clouds, dawn waited. For the first time in her life, Marylin wanted it to come. The next morning, sunlight poured through the blinds like forgiveness that didn't ask permission. Marylin sat at the small table in her apartment, a half-eaten slice of toast growing cold beside her coffee. For once, she wasn't scrolling headlines or checking numbers. She was reading a handwritten note. "Thank you for showing up, Robert." The words were simple, almost fragile, but they carried more weight than all the awards on her shelf. Her phone buzzed another call from Fred Doyle. She let it ring. The company's fate, her reputation. The media circus, they were still waiting outside her door. But something inside her had shifted. For the first time, the noise didn't own her. When the call stopped, a message followed. "The board is meeting at noon. If you don't show, they'll vote you out." She set the phone down, watching the city wake beyond the window. A delivery truck rumbled past, a man whistled on the corner, and a dog barked somewhere below. Life moved on, indifferent and unstoppable. She envied that. A knock sounded. Jonah stood in the doorway, coat dusted with cold air. 2 coffees again in hand. "You're becoming predictable," she said softly. "So are you," he replied, setting 1 cup in front of her. "Skipping calls. Ignoring power. It's almost human." She smirked. "Don't get used to it." "Too late." He sat opposite her. "You going to the meeting?" "I don't know," she admitted. "They'll fire me either way." "Then go tell them why you deserve it." She laughed, short and sharp. "You think that's noble?" "I think it's honest." He leaned back. "You built that company with the belief that no one else could. Maybe it's time you prove yourself wrong." His words settled between them like dust in sunlight. "You're good at this," she said. "What's this?" "Making people hate you a little less." He smiled faintly. "It's not hate I'm after." "Then what?" "Truth." She sighed. "You and your truth. You talk about it like it's a religion." "It is. The only one worth following." She looked down at the coffee, steam curling upward like something alive. "You'll come with me?" "Wouldn't miss it." At noon, they entered the Carter and Doyle headquarters together. The building that once felt like a fortress now loomed like a monument to pride. Inside the boardroom, the air was colder than the marble floors. Fred sat at the head of the table, flanked by lawyers, investors, and faces that had once smiled when she entered. Now they watched like spectators at a trial. "You're late," Fred said. "Traffic," she replied evenly. "Or maybe conscience." "Let's not waste time," he said. "We're voting to remove you as CEO. The damage is irreparable." "You're right," she said, surprising them all. "It is. And it's mine." A ripple moved through the room. "I made choices," she continued. "Good ones for business. Terrible ones for people. I thought the two couldn't coexist." Her gaze swept the table. "I was wrong." Fred shifted in his chair, uncertain now. So this is your confession? No, she said. It's my correction. She took a folder from her bag and slid it across the table. That's a proposal to restructure the firm, cut executive bonuses, raise employee pay, start a fund for social outreach. Fred scoffed. You think charity saves your legacy? I think decency might. He leaned back. Even if we believed you, it's too late. Maybe for me, she said. But not for this place. Jonah watched silently from the corner, eyes steady. Fred turned to the board. We proceed to vote. Hands rose, one by one, until only two remained down: Emily and Jonah. Fred noticed, frowning. Mr. Reese, you don't have a vote here. Jonah stepped forward. Maybe not on paper. But I've worked these floors. I've seen what your decisions cost. She's right, it's not too late. Fred's expression hardened. Who even are you? Someone you laid off for being inconvenient, Jonah said. And maybe the best mistake you ever made. The room went still. Marylin's lips parted in shock. You? Yes, Jonah said softly. I was the operations analyst you fired 3 years ago when I questioned your labor cuts. I built half your cost model, then watched it take everything from people who couldn't fight back. You didn't remember me because I was just another number. She swallowed hard. Why didn't you tell me? Because you wouldn't have listened, he said. But I hoped maybe you'd see it when the world stopped clapping. Fred slammed his hand on the table. This is absurd. He's an imposter. No, Marylin interrupted. He's the only one in this room who's been honest. She turned to Jonah. You should have hated me. I did, he said quietly. But hate's easy. Forgiveness takes work. Silence fell. Fred looked around the table, his authority flickering. Enough sentiment. The vote stands. He banged the gavel. Marylin Carter, removed as CEO effective immediately. The words should have shattered her. Instead, they freed her. She exhaled, a sound half relief, half sorrow. Thank you, she said. Fred frowned. For what? For giving me back my life. She stood, gathering her coat. Good luck, gentlemen, try not to repeat my mistakes. Outside, the air tasted clean. The city noise felt softer somehow, less like judgment and more like life. Jonah walked beside her, hands in his pockets. So that's it? He asked. That's it, she said. The empire falls. And the person? Still standing. She smiled faintly. They stopped at the corner where taxis hissed through puddles. What will you do now? He asked. Start something new. Something honest. Maybe a foundation. Maybe just a quiet life. You don't strike me as quiet. Then maybe it's time to learn. She turned to him. And you? I'll go back to the shelter. They always need hands. You'd trade an office for that? You'd be surprised which one pays more in peace. She laughed softly. You know, you could stay. Help me rebuild something better. You don't need me for that, he said. You just needed someone to remind you you're human. And what if I forget again? He smiled. Then I'll find you. They walked for a while, no destination, just the rhythm of footsteps blending with the hum of the city. The clouds began to part, sunlight catching on wet pavement. Funny, she said. For years, I thought power was everything. Turns out, it was just noise. So what matters? Jonah asked. She thought for a long moment. Connection. Grace. The courage to stop pretending. And forgiveness? That too. They reached the corner of 9th Avenue, where the shelter's sign hung crooked against the brick. Volunteers were unloading boxes of food. Robert stood at the door, waving. You're late, he called. Marylin smiled. Traffic, she said. Jonah laughed under his breath. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and hope. The tables were full, the noise lively but gentle. Marylin rolled up her sleeves. Jonah joined her. Ready? He asked. Always, she said. As she ladled soup into a bowl, the woman from the night before smiled up at her. Didn't think you'd come back, she said. Neither did I, Marylin answered. But some things are worth coming back for. Outside, snow began to fall, dusting the city in quiet forgiveness. Through the window, Marylin could see her reflection faintly in the glass, not the CEO, not the scandal, just a woman who had finally learned the cost of being seen. For the first time in her life, she didn't look away.